Good evening, my dear friends. I welcome you all to the editorial analysis of seven leading newspapers: the Hindu, the Business Line, the Times of India, the Business Standard, the Hindustan Times, the Financial Express, and the Indian Express. Let us begin the first with the Hindu. The first editorial in the Hindu is about the India's multilateral approach, that is all alignment approach. India has evidently moved away from its non-alignment and is trying to bridge alignment with or friendship with many countries. The non-alignment movement has served no purpose at all. Therefore, the infructuous non-alignment movement has been a lesson, and now India is trying to make several blocks, India's membership into the several blocks, and India is trying to be a bridge or the balance between the European and the United States bloc on the one hand, the China and Russia led bloc on the another hand. So this article is about the international relations India is forging now. Instead of the non-alignment movement, India has moved to the all-alignment movement. Then another article is discussing about the delay in the patents under the Indian Patents Act. The delay in the patents has affected the efficiency of the patents. Now the most of the patent holders or the applicants are the residents rather than the foreigners. So the delay in the patents issue and the time lag coming within the patent issue has to be reduced so that the efficient system of patenting and its effective use can be promoted. The Patent Act also requires some more changes which is being discussed in this article. The next one is the editorial is about the Alcaraz, the Spanish Alcaraz's win at the US Opens. The US Open is always breaking the conventions. Now the Spanish youngster, that is the teenage youngster who is matchless against Ruud, the opponent Ruud, in winning the match, the US Open, and it has been the time Swiatek is the women's finalist and winner at the US Open. The Swiatek and Alcaraz are being praised a lot in the editorial, and it is saying that gone are the times of Roger Federer, Djokovic, and the Nadal. Now the youngsters, the very young people, are making it to the finals and winning the matches. The next one is about the requirement of public-private partnership in Indian ports. Recently, India has formed a committee. The committee is under the auspices of central government, which will infringe upon the state's sovereignty or state government sovereignty on the non-major ports. There are 12 major ports in India and several non-major ports. The 12 major ports are Indian government's prerogative, which is under the state government or the Indian government rule, under the Indian government, meaning under the Ministry of Shipping and Indian government's rule, and non-major ports are often developed in a public-private partnership mode. So the central committee which has been formed now wise to take away most of the powers of the state government, which is uncalled for. Then there is the issue of GANVAPI which has been discussed. It is saying that the political agenda behind the GANVAPI issue is very much evident. Why taking the route of courts in such matters is the question which is being asked in the Hindu editorial. Let us discuss the Hindustan Times editorials. The first editorial is discussing about the coming down of the out-of-pocket expenses in the health sector. The out-of-pocket expenses are the expenditure of the general public when an health emergency comes. The coming down of the out-of-pocket expenses indicates that government spending on this front has increased and government has helped the people in tackling the rising or mounting health costs with regard to the health emergency situations. Then there is the editorial which is devoted to a very surprising thing in the UP State Assembly. The UP government has given a special day for a whole day for a full day for its women legislators to speak. The lower house of the Uttar Pradesh government assembly has given a single day for the women legislators to speak. This is a very forward looking move, and this will pave the way for the women empowerment in the legislature. Then there is another article which is discussing about the Indo-Pacific Relations. It gone are the days when, in the turn of the 20th century, there were only few 2,000 Indians in the United States. Now the technical people are taking the US jobs and are leading most of the companies like the Alphabet, the Alphabet, and many companies. The Indians are leading in the education front. Also, many Indian people are working in US and are leading. So, India and US relations, the state by state, in the western front, in the California, so many nations or the states in United States are taking Indian participation in various leading positions, is what is analyzed in this article. Then there is the Prime Minister's scheme for the fisheries, that is Prime Minister's Matsya Samman Yojana, which is helping the fishermen to revive the blue economy in India. The blue economy is the rising the fisheries sector in India. So, an article which is devoted to the fisheries sector. The Indian government is very keen to help the fisheries sector to come up, is what this article is discussing. Now turning our attention to the Financial Express. The first editorial is obviously discussing about the inflation. The inflation has touched the 7% mark in August, and this is a worrisome figure. It is analyzing the contributors of the deficit and the GDP, and the food inflation is also being analyzed in this editorial analysis. So the inflation numbers are very worrisome, even despite Reserve Bank of India's pragmatic approach and Indian government's pragmatic approach on taxing the exports and reducing the export of wheat and rice, and even the PSU oil marketing companies have been given subsidies in the rising crude oil prices, and it has been made conditional that they would not pass on the rising crude oil prices to the Indian population. Despite all these measures, the inflation is at a worrisome figure. The growth target has to be achieved in this inflation numbers. The purchasing power is declining, the food inflation is rising. So this has been discussed in this editorial article. The trade pillar, India's exit from the trade pillar of the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum has been not very much welcomed by most of the editorial articles, because India should have sticked upon at the deciding front of the trade pillar rather than coming out of it, citing the labor, the data issues, the data security issues, and the environmental issues. The laws, the regulations, regulatory laws are not yet implemented fully in India. This issue has been pointed out by India while pulling out of the trade fund, trade pillar. This has not been welcomed by most of the column writers and editorials, is what can be seen. Then the Desh bill, that is the development of enterprises and services hub, in spite of the erstwhile the economic special economic zones, and before that exclusive special the export zones, that is ESEZ, exclusive special economic zones. Instead of all this, now the Desh is being promoted. The Desh bill has come up, the development of enterprises and services hub. What does it mean? Many the regulations are just constraining the development of SEZs. During the pandemic times, we have seen that SEZs face many transportation problems and many legal hassles. So these legal hassles are removed in the Desh scheme, which is very encouraging. But to compete with China, even for Bangladesh, which has removed most of the laws, China, most of the companies are. The Indian Express is discussing four editorials. The first one is, as usual, the in other newspapers also it has been pointed out, India had withdrawn from the RCEP, that is Regional Economic Cooperation, in 2019. Later, India tried to bridge ties with several countries, including US, the Japan, UK, and Canada, and European Union also. Now India is pulling out of the trade pillar of the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, which is not welcomed by the editorials and the columnists, because India should have sticked on to its position, and India should have been a decision maker instead of pulling out of this trade pillar. India should have to grab this opportunity of getting a trade bloc in its fold. Instead, India has withdrawn from this bloc and had decided to remain with the taxation, bribery, then the environmental bloc. So this is not welcomed by most of the columnists, as I said. Then there is a question of a Twitter picture which shows that the burning of the symbol or the dress symbol of a political party. This is uncalled for. The Congress, which has portrayed this as part of the Bharat Jodo Yatra advertisement, is totally uncalled for. This is not the way in which the Bharat Jodo Yatra and the development of the Congress has to be done, is what is discussed in this article. Nothing much about it. Then the reducing disparities, there is one article, the UNDP's Human Development Index. India ranks 132 in the Human Development Index. Several components of the index has been discussed. Several inequalities have been discussed in this article. The health inequality is being discussed. The education inequality is being discussed. Then the income inequality is being discussed. So many places, the overall the global performance has been very much dismal due to the COVID or something like that. The India has opposed the health inequality because during the COVID times India had faced many deaths, which has been factored in the Human Development Index rankings. India has opposed this. Then there is one John Britta's article which is giving some tips to the Congress for the Bharat Jodo Yatra. The Bharat Jodo Yatra is planned in such a way that it is passing through some states which is not the center stage of several disparities which the ruling party has committed. For example, it is not covering Gujarat. UP it's covering very less time. In Kerala it's covering 19 days. This is a greater disparity which has to be removed so for the real message of the Bharat Jodo Yatra to be given to the friends. The business line editorials are all a sum up of several economic things happening in India. For example, the inflation is being discussed. As I have already discussed in other editorial analyses, the inflation is a cause of concern, and every newspaper is pointing out and very much worried about it. Then there is another editorial analysis which is discussing the aging population of the Europe. So there is an opportunity for Indians because India is having rich demographic dividend. The youngest population is there in India. That is, India is very much young. So a demographic dividend is ensured. So it is an opportunity for Indians to go abroad, yes, especially for the doctors and nurses to go abroad and work because the aging population in the US, United States, and the Europe is a very worrisome factor. There are not many people who are working there. So it is an opportunity for Indian youth to go there and work. Another article is discussing about the dearth of the wheels of the railways. The Durgapur steel factory, that is, which is producing wheels, is not providing much support to the impetus to the coach factories, and we are forced to import the wheels. So this is a growing and nagging concern which the business line editorial is saying we have to address this issue, and the number of wheels to be produced, although we are having the resources to produce the wheels in India, however we are not able to produce it and are importing from abroad. This has to be stopped. Then there is the article about the DESH scheme. I've already discussed about the DESH scheme, that is the development of enterprises and services hub, which is a replacement of the special economic zone. And the COVID times have brought to the fore the difficulties involved in the special economic zones. The DESH scheme does away with many rules and regulations, but however this is not a complete straight fit. We have to evolve because there are some lacunas in the special economic zones which has been addressed in this DESH scheme. However, we must be more competitive, and to be competitive we must inculcate much more deregulations, is what the business line editorial is saying. The Business Standard has 4 editorials lined up. It's first discussing about the inflation which has touched 7% mark. It's very tiresome journey to tackle this inflation. It's a very long haul which is going on dragging and dragging. The world economies all over the world are also having inflation. The growth numbers projections are not very much encouraging. The food inflation is at a very high pace. So it's a very dangerous trend which is being showing. The Reserve Bank of India 6% mark is always breached for the straight 3 to 4 months in a sequential manner. This is not going to come down. Then the next editorial is discussing about the young blood in the tennis matches. Most of the young people in the tennis matches are just showing up. Alcaraz is one example, Ruud is another example. It has given the example of several youngsters who are taking the center stage. The big 3 who were the Roger Federer, the Nadal and the Djokovic are though aging and showing some Grand Slam wins. Djokovic completed his 21st Grand Slam win. Nadal completed his 22nd Grand Slam win in this year. However, the teenagers, the youngsters are taking up the center stage. Dominic is one such small person who is occupying the center stage. Then Alcaraz, then the root. Alcaraz is teenage. So then the generation next of the tennis is coming up. It's very intriguing to see that Roger Federer has been relegated to the 800th rank. This is very unbearable thing. Medvedev is one such youngster. So lots of youngsters are coming up in the tennis match is what the editorial article is saying. Then there is the question of freebies. The article goes on discussing that sometimes what happened that the political pressure has seen the victory in several of the government's initiatives. For example, in the planning commission decision, the finance minister had to resign when Jawaharlal Nehru was pressing for the need for a planning commission. Then the middle path was suggested in the nationalization of banks in 1970s and 80s. However, the finance minister had to resign, but Indira Gandhi went ahead with the plan to nationalize the banks. When the welfare schemes are there, in education and health sectors, for example, the necessity is felt as the welfare scheme. That is not a freebie. But when the freebies are offered, which are off budget items, which becomes a very heavy burden on the exchequer, must be stopped. So these freebies have to be weighed in the context in which it is being provided. If it is just burdening the exchequer and it is off budget item and not within the health and the education front, it should be stopped. Then the next editorial article is discussing how histories have remembered the leaders. For example, the Richard II was held responsible for the plot to kill a very noble man. The Richard VII was also highlighted as the person who killed another noble man. The Dara Shikoh, a very noble person who was the successor to the throne, was killed by Aurangzeb. This is the plotting which happens. So history remembers. In Mahabharata, it is seen that though Pandavas had restricted Bhishma in the Sharashaya, however, they were found singing with Bhishma the Vishnu Sahasranamam. So the history is for those leaders, finding the leaders, those who are very much cause behind the making of the history. The article is taking the example of Cyrus Mistry, who was benevolent and a very nice person. So he will be remembered as the Tata chairman and a very great business enthusiast and a very nice person for many years and generations to come. The Times of India is discussing around 3 plus 2 articles. The 5 articles, out of the 5 articles, the first article is discussing about the moonlighting. What is this moonlighting? It has been seen that with the work from home proliferation, the moonlighting has also thrived. Moonlighting means working for another firm. While working with a firm, working for another firm is called moonlighting. This has been discussed. This is clearly cheating. Actually, this has been discussed in the editorial. It's a very interesting fact to know that moonlighting is there. However, there are certain employers who are just welcoming this moonlighting. Then there is an article or the editorial about the notification needed for the cancer cases and deaths, because almost 14 million people are affected with cancer and 7 million die. Unless the notification is being made, the early detection of the cancer cannot be made, and this will result in the death. So the notification, when it happens, just like in the case of COVID, when the notification of the cancer patients happen, then the government will take care of them, and this will reduce the cancer deaths. Then there is another article which is discussing about the influencers I am not talking about influencer, the influencers, social influencers. There are some social media platforms like YouTube and all where there are some influencers who will influence the dressing sense and the kinds of style which the modern generation are just getting influenced now. This is a very small article which is discussing about the influences, and then there is an article about the Ganwapi. This has been there in all the newspapers. The court decision is a very crucial decision. However, the Times of India editorial is saying that all the religious the religious the religious groups must come together and discuss them rather than bothering the court with all these decisions. And then there is the question of the question of the love failures and the suicides being discussed. The National Crime Bureau records show that several youngsters in the age group of 18 to 30 are committing suicide because masculinity is being portrayed as achieving what the men want. The masculinity means getting the result, that is being liked by the person, the girl whom he likes. The person, if getting a positive result, the masculinity of the person is being achieved. This is a very wrong notion, and this is resulting in many suicides, is what the article is saying. Friends, I have come to the editorial analysis of these 7 awe-inspiring newspapers. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. Meet you tomorrow with some more analysis like this. Till then, bye.